letting us know what's happening on the ground. Thank you very much. Now we stay in the region. German companies have paid nearly 1.72 billion euros in taxes to Russia since its full-scale invasion of Ukraine, raising concerns that the money is indirectly supporting Moscow's war effort. Despite sanctions and international pressure, more than half of German firms that operated in Russia before the war continue to do business there. Critics say these tax payments strengthen the Kremlin's war economy and are urging companies to pull out completely. According to a report by the Kyiv School of Economics and B4 Ukraine estimates that foreign firms still active in Russia collectively pay over 1.7 billion euros in taxes last year alone, funds that campaigners say could be helping sustain the conflict with Ukraine. Now we welcome back Professor Andrew Latham. He's a professor of international relations, joins us live from Minneapolis. Thank you very much, Professor Andrew, for staying with us. Now, looking at this, isn't this surprising that we keep learning about Europe funding their own war in Ukraine and among Ukraine and Russia? And should this German government impose stricter measures to prevent such domestic companies from operating in Russia, especially during this ongoing war and escalation?
Short answer is yes. If they're serious about putting economic pressure on Russia as a means of ending this war, then closing these loopholes it should be a priority. And they are loopholes. European firms that are non-strategic, that sell socks and food, things like that, are not covered by European Union sanctions. They continue to operate, not just German firms, by the way, lots of firms from Europe. And as a condition of operating, of course, they have to pay taxes. And so on the one hand, the Europeans, the Germans in particular, are trying to disentangle themselves from oil dependence and natural gas dependence. There's this, which has been under the radar now. The report from the Kyiv School of Economics highlighted that in 1 year alone, German firms paid taxes that would buy 10,000 drones, which would have a material effect on the battlefield. So if the Germans are serious about this Zeitwende, this change in orientation, this movement towards strategic realism, disentangling from Russia, and really driving home the importance of isolating Russia, then they need to close this loophole. Maybe this will be the occasion for that.
Yes, indeed. And, as we know, there are 19 sanctions from EU towards Russia, but these sanctions are not completely dismantling or not debunking the war efforts in Ukraine. So how do these tax payments align? How do you think it aligns or contradicts with Germany's broader commitments to support Ukraine openly and to be involved heavily in NATO as well as in the coalition of the willing?
Right. Well, the German government has competing and conflicting interests. On the one hand, it needs geopolitically to put pressure on Russia to end this war on terms that are favorable to Ukraine, but more importantly, terms that are favorable to the European Union and the European members of NATO and the coalition of the willing. So that's on the one hand. On the other hand, they have an interest in the robustness, maintaining and sustaining the robustness of the German economy. And that, at least in part, is dependent upon continuing to have German firms doing business in Russia. So they're trying to strike a balance there, and to my mind, they have not struck a very good balance. The geopolitical or strategic imperative ought to override the economic one, but that's easy for me to say. I wouldn't be out of a job, for example. So the Germans are caught between these two, the German state between these two imperatives, and they haven't done a very good job so far. It has to be said, too, that disentangling the German and the Russian economies after 30-something years of close integration and entanglement is proving to be very difficult. There are Russian laws that make it difficult for German firms to leave, and there is also just a profit to be made by these firms continuing to do business in Germany. So the German firms, as opposed to the German state, have a disincentive to disentangle and a powerful incentive to continue to doing business in Russia, even if that means paying taxes to the Russian state, which ultimately fund the Russian war effort.
that, I would like to thank Professor Andrew Latham for always joining us and sharing that insight and staying with us throughout our news. Thank you very much. Now we move on to our next news. Germany's Defense Minister Boris Pistorius is confident that the country's fractious ruling coalition can agree on a new model of military service in time for it to come into effect next year as planned, given security concerns over Russia. The cabinet has already agreed to Boris Pistorius's proposal for a new voluntary military service to help boost the number of recruits and reservists. The plan still requires approval by the German parliament. However, it has met with resistance from lawmakers within Pistorius's own party, the Social Democrats, as well as from some of Chancellor Friedrich Merz's conservatives. Meanwhile, Pistorius has stated that everyone is aware of the seriousness of the situation, and he's therefore confident that the law will come into force at the beginning of next year. And that's a wrap on the NewsX Eurozone. Keep watching NewsX World for more news updates from around the world.